Hey guys, Gongrongzong here. So it's been announced that the very first Warfront in Battle for Azeroth is going to take part in the Arathi Highlands, specifically at the fortress of Stromgarde. Now, make no mistake, this isn't just an arbitrary area that Blizzard has designated for the Alliance and Horde to duke it out, but it's actually an area you should very much care about for your faction. So let's get straight into the reasons why. At this point, I'd just like to give a short shout out to a couple of my patrons whose lovely portraits are up here on my wall. Thank you very much for your support. I couldn't do these videos without you. Number 1. Strategic positioning. The strategic location of Stromgarde cannot be understated. Ever since the opening of the Dark Portal, it has been an area hotly contested by the Horde and Alliance for this exact reason. Stromgarde sits in Arathi, the only land area that connects the lower half of the Eastern Kingdoms to its upper half. In fact, if you want to be specific about it, there is only one bridge, the Thandor Span, that connects the two halves. This has massive implications for any defensive or offensive plans for either faction. For example, for the Alliance, during their early wars with the Horde, Stromgarde was key in ensuring that the supply lines were kept open between Stormwind, Ironforge, and Lordaeron. Without the presence of Stromgarde holding off the Orcish advancement, there would be no plausible way in which these kingdoms could help each other, at least that is by land. During the Second War, Stromgarde was also attacked by the Horde, and in doing so, it was apparently significant enough to turn the tide of the war. Quoted straight from the Warcraft 2 official strategy guide, Uthok believed the tide of war was slowly turning in the Horde's favour. So how does that apply to today's situation in Battle for Azeroth? Well, let's take a closer look at the map and examine it within the context of what happens if each faction loses Stromgarde. Let's start with the Horde. What would happen if the Horde loses Stromgarde? Well, the first significant implication of this is that Silvermoon City would be completely surrounded and cut off by the Alliance. The Alliance would be virtually free to advance all the way north and besiege Silvermoon City with little resistance. Remember, the Horde have already lost the Undercity, which we know from the past several years has been an important defensive bulwark for the Blood Elves. Lothremar has even acknowledged this in his conversations with Sylvanas. Now you may say at this point that most of the Alliance capitals, including the now rediscovered TIRAS, are in the lower half of the Eastern Kingdoms. If they were to mobilize their armies, they would have to travel a considerable distance just to reach Silvermoon, allowing the Horde ample time to mobilize reinforcements by sea. However, this is slightly negated by 2 points. One of them is of course the recent Undercity invasion, which has shown that the Alliance has more than enough capabilities to amass their entire army in the northern parts of the Eastern Kingdoms within a relatively short amount of time. Secondly, we cannot forget about the Wildhammer Dwarfs, who have a significant presence in the hinterlands at Eyrie Peak. The hinterlands is but a stone's throw away from the Blood Elf lands. Even by themselves, the Wildhammer clan is a force to be reckoned with, and their fortress can easily act as an offensive forward base for the entirety of the Alliance army. In other words, it is very bad news for the Blood Elves if the Alliance were to retake Stromgarde. The Eastern Kingdoms would be literally under their entire control, and their lands would be under immediate threat. However, losing Silvermoon City would not be the only worry for the Horde. If the Alliance were to retake Stromgarde, they would also be in a prime position to easily retake the island fortress of Tol Barad, as it lies in very close proximity of the major Alliance capitals, namely Stormwind, Ironforge, and now TIRAS. Why is Tol Barad of any significance, you may ask? Well, historically, Tol Barad has actually been a territory of the now extinct human empire of Stromgarde. It acted as a powerful staging point for the Alliance in mobilizing attacks against the Horde, and was significant enough for the Horde to launch a massive siege against it and raze it to the ground during the Second War. Following the Second War though, the nation of TIRAS actually laid claim to the ruined island citadel and built the prison over it that we now know of. As a fun fact, this is why much of the architectural style of the buildings in Tol Barad will have similar themes to what we're going to see on Cold TIRAS. Should the Alliance, and specifically Cold TIRAS, retake Tol Barad, they would have yet another massive island base to stage attacks against not only the Horde, but their new naval ally, the Zandalari. Stormwind and Ironforge would be practically impenetrable by sea, with such a massive bulwark of forces standing between them and Kalimdor. This is why Garrosh was determined to reclaim it following the events of the Cataclysm, sending his elite warriors known as Hellscream's Reach to the island, as he understood its strategic location for both offensive and defensive purposes. Finally, if the Horde should lose Stromgarde, the Alliance will also be able to finally retake Gilneas. The Worgen are presumably looking for a new home ever since they got evicted out by the Forsaken, and now this is made even worse as their temporary home in Teldrassil has been burned to the ground in battle for Azeroth. I have no doubt that Greymane would want to retake his homeland should he have the chance, as other than the Great Wall, much of the city's infrastructure is still very much intact. Should the Gilneans reclaim Gilneas, they will be able to have the potential to rebuild their forces, and the Worgen would pose as yet another considerable threat to the Horde. So all in all, really bad news for the Horde if they were to lose Stromgarde. It would not only significantly bolster Alliance forces, but would also put one of the Horde's main capitals in jeopardy. Now let's flip it over on its head. What if the Alliance were to lose Stromgarde? Well, with a sizable Horde presence in Arathi, the immediate repercussion would be that the Wildhammer dwarves in the hinterlands would be cut off from the main Alliance bastions. However, they'll not only be cut off, but they'll also be sandwiched between Stromgarde and Silvermoon City. Aerie Peak is currently the only Alliance stronghold exercising influence over the northern parts of the Eastern Kingdoms. Without mincing words, it simply cannot fall for the Alliance. If Aerie Peak were be taken by the Horde would dominate not only Kalimdor, but the entire upper half of the Eastern Kingdoms, cornering the Alliance to a relatively small area of Azeroth. In addition to that, the Alliance would be in no position to retake Tol Barad or Gilneas with a Horde presence on its very doorstep. This would hamper their ability to expand their forces, and in an arms race like in Battle for Azeroth, that would be a really bad scenario for them. To make matters worse, and while it is highly unlikely, if the Horde were able to retake Tol Barad due to them establishing a foothold in Stromgarde, the Alliance would be in very big trouble. The island fortress would essentially cut off Stormwind and Ironforge from Cold TIRAS. Not only that, but it will also serve as a dangerous forward base for the Horde to launch any form of attack whatsoever upon the Alliance kingdoms, whether it be in the form of frequent raids on their supply lines, a formidable naval blockade, or an all-out siege on their cities. Therefore, from a strategic standpoint, both factions simply cannot afford for the other to take over Stromgarde. It is so important that it would heavily shift the advantage onto any faction that manages to get it. Nevertheless, militaristic reasons are not the only things pushing for Stromgarde's importance. Economic reasons should also be highly considered. Number 2. The Resource War. If you've ever played the battleground Arathi Basin before, you'll know that it's a fight for the area's resources. Well, this couldn't be closer to the truth, as it serves as a great microcosm to showcase the entire Arathi area as a whole. Taken straight from the official game guide, the area is a mountain-rimmed valley with some of the most arable acres in the Eastern Kingdoms. It has long been a prime point of societal development, offering lumber, gold, and prime grazing land for livestock. In any war, resources to sustain the army is of the utmost importance, and Arathi can serve as a gold mine for either side. This is exactly why it's not just some arbitrary battleground that Blizzard created for us to fight over, but is actually an area of critical importance for both factions. The most prized land of the entire continent simply cannot fall into the hands of the enemy. To make matters worse for the Horde, with the Undercity gone, it's logical to assume that the Forsaken Defilers of Arathi Basin are now much weaker. Being cut off from their main source of reinforcements and power, the Horde will somehow have to pour troops back into this warfront to shore up the Forsaken's hold on the basin. Lastly, we cannot underestimate the historical value of the area, especially with regards to the human kingdoms of the Alliance. Years ago, the human tribes of Arathi formed a powerful nation, the Kingdom of Arathor. Stromgarde, known as Strom at the time, served as its capital and as the most powerful human presence by far. These were the very first humans that went into a military alliance with the High Elves and defeated the Trolls together in the Troll Wars. Older than TIRAS, older than Lordaeron, and older than Dalaran, Strom was the pinnacle of human civilization during its peak. By this metric, we cannot underestimate its emotional value that it holds over the humans of the Alliance. In a sense, it is their very first kingdom, a symbol of how they emerged out of the darkness and established civilization. An analogy to this would be perhaps the incredible Greek temples that have been preserved as heritage sites. If they should fall into the hands of a foreign power, it would be simply sacrilegious to the Greek people. Or perhaps a hotly contested city such as Jerusalem, in which its possessions mean much more than just simply the infrastructure and area it comprises. We as humans are emotional beings, and we attach great meanings to places, especially if such places have always belonged to us or to our ancestors. Should the Alliance reclaim Stromgarde, it will be nothing short of a significant moral boost to the forces of the humans, the Kultirans, and the Gilneans. If they can retake their homeland that had been out of their reach for so many years, then they can do anything. In the same vein, if the Alliance can retake Stromgarde, it would only boost their confidence in retaking Gilneas and Tol Barad, neighbouring areas of human civilization that should have always belonged to them. The Alliance would do well to secure such a victory. Its people would have renewed confidence in their leaders, and their current leadership would be able to justify to other potential allied races that they are strong enough to fight against the Horde and reclaim what is theirs. On the other hand, the Horde cannot afford for the Alliance to gain such a significant emotional victory. The Horde cannot allow for such a snowball effect to take place. And if anything, they would look extremely weak to their allies for letting a place of such importance go to their mortal enemies. Looking at these three reasons, this is exactly why it makes sense for the Warfronts to keep changing sides. It's not just for arbitrary gameplay reasons. Should any one faction hold onto the Warfront for too long, it will have far-reaching consequences for the other faction. And that's a wrap. I hope this video has helped you to get a little bit more invested into the new features that Blizzard is introducing in Battle for Azeroth. If you'd like to see more of such content, consider hitting that subscribe button, as I'll always be doing more of these as they get announced. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Azeroth.